Look what I got from Banggood. It's a little baby frequency drive. And here is the impressively short user manual. It's only an A3 size piece of paper, but hey, it's printed on both sides. And if you're interested in the manual, I took a few photos, and the link is in the description below the video, because I'm pretty sure I will lose this at some point. Looks like the cardboard box took a hit during shipping, and it was shipped like this. It wasn't even wrapped in the familiar black and white Chinese plastic bag. Hopefully the drive is still okay, otherwise this video is going nowhere. I just did my visual inspection and found a few things to complain about. Hey, it wouldn't be a Rolingmetal review if there wasn't something I could bitch about. It's nothing serious. The heatsink is a bit rough over here and in some other places. The holes could use some deburring, and there is a bit of thermal paste on here, and that's nasty stuff if you get it in your clothes. Not that I care too much about that. I'm not wearing raggedy old clothes for nothing when playing in the old barn. Now let me show you why I am reviewing this little frequency drive. A while back, when I tried to fire up the old lathe, it didn't start. After checking the power plug and the circuit breakers, I found this. The old Allen Bradley drive was completely cooked on the inside, and it's the same here with the cover. There might have even been a fire, and I hate to think what could have happened, since the old barn here has a roof that is made from cane. These look to be cobwebs, but I'm not sure if they had anything to do with the drive smoking out. But I do know that I left the power on, and probably for a very long time, and the 30-year-old drive was on its way out anyway. It needed at least a 30 seconds warm up before it started to work properly. I should have installed a switch to easily switch off the drive, but instead I got lazy and left the plug in the socket. Anyway, I will now replace this with a new drive, and after that I'll talk a bit more. I changed my mind and I've installed another one of these old Allen Bradley drives. I've got a few more of these. This one is getting a bit rusty, but at least it is working. I've installed this old drive so we can all listen to the beautiful soundtrack of this vintage Allen Bradley running a 1 horsepower 4-pole motor. Here we go. 50 Hertz. Well, that wasn't too bad, right? Especially when you compare it to my other lathe that has a 6-pole motor. I am now at my other lathe. As you can see, the rust spots have gone. Let's listen to its tune. 50 Hertz. This one maxes out at 60 Hertz. Oh, that's enough. So that's the sound difference between a 4-pole and a 6-pole motor, both 1 horsepower, both from the same manufacturer, and that's MEZ or MES, and I believe those were made in Yugoslavia, which no longer exist. Since we are listening to the sound of electric motors, let's also quickly listen to this 2-speed motor. It switches between a 4 and an 8-pole configuration. It's also known as a Dahlander motor. And trust me, you will know which one is the 8-pole configuration. I have no idea why it made such a bad sound in 8-pole configuration. And remember, this is not running from a frequency drive. If anybody knows, put it in the comments. I bought this motor to maybe use one day on a homemade wood lathe, but with this kind of noise, I'm not sure about this motor. Alright, now I'm going to really install that baby frequency drive. Installed, including a on-off switch. It's not really a professional installation, but it's what I had laying around, and it will have to do. But I'm sure my brother will probably shake his head when he sees this. I don't really like those big openings underneath here. It almost exposes the terminals, and there are no cable restraints. But I fixed the cables to the wooden board, and it should be fine. But all kinds of insects and flies and flying spiders will have no problem getting inside. On the sides and on top, this 3/4 kilowatt model is rather closed compared to the heavier models. It's one of the reasons I selected this drive. It should help keep the chips outside, and if they do get in, I guess I'll end up with some more fireworks. The other reason I chose this model, it doesn't have one of those small little noisy fuckers to keep things cool. It only relies on this big aluminium heatsink, but to help it a bit, I've got a big opening on the rear of the wooden panel. Alright, I'll plug it in and switch it on, see what happens. I already know, but I'll try to act real surprised no matter the outcome. Well, it's alive. Now let's see if she will run. And there she goes. I am so surprised. The newer and much faster electronics sound nice and quiet, and that will help me with the audio quality of my videos. Although I must admit, I do like teasing you guys with a little harmonic noise. But I can always fire up the wood lathe. That's a real noisy bastard. This is the reason I haven't done any wood turning videos lately. It's just terrible. Looks like this one is maxing out at 65 Hz. Well, that's one of the things I need to change. But for that I need to study the user manual a bit. I've studied the user manual a bit. Although it is very short, it is also very readable. No Chinglish here. Now, I'm not an electrician, so I don't pretend to understand everything here, but I think I have a good idea on how to make the changes I want. Let's quickly walk through this thing. And again, if you want to see this user manual yourself, there's a link in the description below the video. My drive is the AT1 model, and that's a single phase to three phase unit. Oh, and it's a 3/4 kilowatt, but that's not mentioned anywhere in this document. So I guess you'll also get this impressive document with other models. Apparently there's also a single phase to single phase model. That's very interesting. I wonder how that works or performs. These here are the power in and out terminals. That's pretty straightforward. And this here describes the COM ports or the I/O ports. I believe I only need X4 for my on and off switch. This here is the basic wiring diagram for the model I have. These terminals here seem to be missing, but they are on the circuit board. With a bit of soldering they might even work. This might be useful. A 15 volt power output. I could use that to hook up an external cooling fan if the drive gets too warm. That just might extend the life of the frequency drive. And these three here, the external analog voltage input, that's probably to hook up a external 10K pot meter to regulate the frequency, but I'm not planning to use that. This here is the diagram for the single phase to single phase model, and it mentions non-removed capacitor and removed capacitor. So it looks like they must be talking about induction motors. That's very interesting. This here is the three phase to three phase wiring diagram, and there's a picture of the front operating panel. Let's move to the other side. This here describes how the menu system works, and that's pretty basic. The rest is basically all parameters that can be configured and some fault codes. Not all of these parameters make sense, but I've identified a few that I want to change. First, there's a P6 here, and that should fix my 65 Hz frequency limit. P11 should be set to external port, and that's for my external on and off switch. By the way, P10 needs to be changed if you also want to use a external 10K pot meter. P13, it configures the spindle braking. It's probably set slow enough for this lightweight spindle and chuck, but I'm planning to install a bigger one, so I will increase the slow down time a bit. Braking can generate power, and too much power can fry the circuit. A heavier chuck and workpiece store more energy when spinning, so I think it's better to be safe than sorry. I haven't found the parameter that sets the spin up time, but I think it is slow enough as it is. P22 seems to be the carrier frequency setting, and changing that might have an influence on the harmonic noise the frequency drive generates. I might experiment with that a little, although I'm pretty happy with the noise it makes as it is. Parameter P50 seems to be connected to I/O port X1, and then P53 here is connected to multifunction input 4, so that's X4, and by default it's set to 5, and 5 is wire forward operation. So X4 needs to be connected to my on and off switch, but we already knew that from the previous page on the other side of the paper. P61, it apparently controls what is displayed on the display, and its default setting is the frequency, but apparently it can also display the speed. Unfortunately, it looks like it can only display the motor speed and not the spindle speed. I haven't found the parameter that sets the ratio between the pulleys, and that's too bad, because it would be nice to display the spindle speed. I know this is possible with some drives, but it looks like this one doesn't have that feature, and that's too bad, because well, this lathe has only one pulley configuration, so it would be nice if I could display the spindle speed. Alright, so now I'm going to hook up an external switch and change a few parameters. As you can see, I've hooked up the external on-off switch. It's connected to the commons and the X4 I/O port. And after setting parameter 11 to external port, which is 2, it now actually works. As you can hear. I've also changed the parameter 6, and it's now set to 80 Hz. So the frequency goes now all the way up to 80 Hz. Let's see, what else did I change? Oh yeah. I've set P12 to 0, and that stands for inertial stop, so it is no longer using voltage to break the spindle, and it now stops in about 2 seconds, and for me that's good enough. I did mess around with parameter 22, but I could not increase the carrier frequency any more than the default setting of 10, and that's okay. It's quiet enough as it is. I think that's about it. I didn't make any more changes. One more thing you guys might find interesting. F here is the dialed in frequency. I'll set it to 50. Close enough. And when you start the motor, it changes to H, and that's the running speed frequency. When you hit this function button, that is supposed to be an R, and that stands for RPM. But obviously this is way too fast for the 4-pole motor, and I think the frequency drive expects a 2-pole motor, because then that number would be correct. A stands for the aperture that the motor is currently drawing. I'll try to stop the belt with this rag, see what happens. It goes up, and that's correct. Next, T, I don't know, it could be temperature, could be time. Either way, the number displayed is incorrect. This number here, that is a countdown number in hours, and you can change that parameter in P127. Not sure if that's very useful, and I haven't figured out what the E stands for. Goes up a little with the frequency, and we're back at H, the running frequency, and that changes back to F when stopping. I guess that's about all I wanted to show you guys. One important thing I haven't figured out yet, and I'm starting to think it might not even be possible with this drive, even though it is listed on the Banggood webpage. And I'm talking about vector control. When I configured vector control on my other lathe, with the Enflix and NF9000 drive, it made a huge difference at slow speeds. And for a lathe like this with a fixed belt configuration, I think it's kinda important, especially if you want to turn larger diameters. And I am planning to install a bigger chuck. I think maybe there is a more extensive Chinese manual, but with this piece of paper I don't see where I can input the motor specifications needed for vector control. There are some torque compensation options, and that could be useful, but it's not the same. If it turns out that vector control isn't possible, then for me this drive is less interesting, and I would definitely go for something else to replace the broken frequency drive on my other lathe. But for my wood lathe this frequency drive would be just fine, as for wood turning the low speeds aren't that important. This pretty much concludes my installation and configuration review for this little baby frequency drive. In my next video I will be using this drive to do some turning, so come back next week to see how that turns out. To be continued.